This next episode is a collective one. I am joined by a co-host, and you will learn more about who they are in just a moment. But together we sit down for a literary discussion centered around the book A Body Made Home, They Black Trans Love by Kai Marshall Green. This memoir follows Dr. Green's journey from baby girl to black boy through race, gender, academia, and identity, made deeply personal. But this conversation is about more than simply discussing a book. It's a reflection. It is about the moments where someone else's story causes you to pause and think about your own. So throughout this episode, we explore the themes that stay with us long after we finish reading, from higher academia and Black transmasculine identity to mental health, self-construction, family, vulnerability, and survival. We also reflect on the writing itself, what it felt like to read these experiences on the page, where the book challenged us and where it mirrored parts of our own lives. So sit back, settle in as we unpack the stories, ideas, tensions, and emotions that emerged for both of us while reading A Body Made Home. I know you will enjoy this episode.
Them boys, them boys, amplifying, transmitting, color voices, yeah, we here making noise, making noise, visibility equals possibility, you know we them boys, them boys, amplifying, transmitting, color voices, yeah.
Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Shawn, Aaron, he, him, his. Today I am joined with my co-host. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, happy to. Hi, everyone. Hi, Shawn. Yes, my name is Joël Simeu, and I use he, him pronouns. I am typically behind the scenes as production assistant. The podcast, though, I have been on the show also. And I am I'll say I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I'm a musician, a cat dad. I like to cook. And I'm also, when I'm not doing all those things, working on my doctoral thesis at Cornell University. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you here. And so you mentioned being a previous guest on the show. You actually showed up on 2 episodes. So episode 69 and episode 77. And so it's episode 69, you talked a lot about your transition journey. For folks who don't know who Joel is, please make sure to go back and listen to those episodes. Episode 77 was a highlight episode of you sharing your role as a production assistant and what you actually do behind the scenes. And so both of them great episodes. You are a great human being. I'm so glad that you are here with me today. And so you want to tell folks why we are here today together?
Yes, I will. And also, which is something that I forget too, I'm the voice that you hear sometimes in between the episodes, which when I'm listening to the episodes, I'm always caught off guard a little bit. So I'm like, wait, that sounds like me.
Well, but it is you.
It is me.
Yeah.
Yes. I love to be part of Dem Bois. And today we are doing something a little bit different than usual. Shawn and I are here to talk about a book. Yes, we're here to talk about a book by one of our former past guest, Dr. Kai Marshall Green, who wrote this beautiful book called A Body Made Home, They Black Trans Love. And this was actually a book that Shawn gifted to me for my birthday. It came around my birthday. We both kind of took it upon ourselves to read it. Of course, to support Dr. Green, and also because, it's a beautiful book. Touches on a lot of topics about his transition, experiences with mental health, kind of growing up, his experiences with his family, his parents, we sort of read this on our own, and we would, kind of check in with each other here and there. But yeah, we thought it would be sort of beautiful to sort of like engage with it, have a conversation about it, and also hopefully sort of encourage others to read this book, to reach out to us if you do, and just sort of like, be thinking about what it means to be Black and trans, and different iterations of it. I mean, this is essentially also what the podcast is, right? Like thinking about like the uniqueness of our lives, and Dr. Green, yeah, just sort of does a really beautiful rendition of his own story. Yeah, so we're here to talk about that. And I want to start us off actually right away thinking about the title, A Body Made Home. Yeah, I mean, that kind of, you sort of think like, okay, what does this mean? And immediately, what I really appreciated actually that sort of grounded me with this book was that there the first section, part one, the book is also divided in a couple parts. There's an epilogue, part one, part two, part three, and they're all sort of distinct in the voice, right? Like how it reads, how it sounds, um, what it's about, But something that I appreciated right away was that that as you enter the book and you're thinking about what home means, um, the first chapter sort of starts with a bunch of definitions of the word home. That's something that stuck out to me, right? So you have home as a four-letter word. You have home as a proper noun, maybe to indicate a person. Um, home as a bunch, right? You're like kind of going through it. And the definition for me that sort of stuck is the last one. So this is we're towards the end of the first chapter there on page 31. And Dr. Green writes, "Home is inside," and we're gonna be reading at least, yeah, we're gonna be reading from the book itself. So just to sort of, yeah, so you can listen. Yeah, I will try to read slowly because I want the words to land. But yes, this is one that sort of like stuck for me because of it's sort of like um, yeah, it helps me kind of understand like what this book would be about, right? Like I think there's a lot of repetition that happens. And here we have a definition of home as something that is inside a four-letter word, which is body. And Dr. Green writes, I'm going to read this part. But there come a day when baby girl can breathe both air and water, when baby girl can both walk and fly, a day when body be made another four-letter word, returning to her like a name, just on the tip of her tongue, being coming whole home. And when she get there, they discover home again anew, a four-letter word, love. Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna keep reading the last section too. The next paragraph follows. Love like the cotton candy cloud of old black women in white, shielding black mama as she catch the holy ghost, the right to remain protected and loud as she want as she loose it. That's how God show up in black mama. She's safe to lose and loose in that sanctuary. Many a Sunday, something just catch a hold of a person and they can't help but break free. Um, yeah, and sort of right away, the way that we're introduced to how Dr. Green is talking about himself, his past self, is through um, his relationship with his mom, Black Mama, his relationship with his younger self, who he initially introduces as Black Girl, who turns into, Black trans man. And so the book sort of like takes you through that transition, that transformation. But I think something that's really grounded in this book, in this telling, is how one, like the homes that you make of your body, yes, but also like the homes that you make from other people. And that's why I kind of love that, like identifying home as love, right? Like, I mean, that's like, I feel like the theme of home is one of those like quintessential themes of like everything, right? Like, where do we belong? What is home? Is home a place, right? Is home a feeling? Is home a sensation? And I think I appreciated the urgency of all of these different definitions because it's sort of like, at least for me, like points towards understanding home as something that is sovereign, meaning like like there's like freedom in being able to articulate like this is where I feel at home. My body is a place that is mine. That can be a sovereign place where I feel at home, or these people who love me are also like experiences of experiencing home. Yeah, and to sort of like start us off in that way, I just thought was really beautiful. Yeah, I thought it was really beautiful.
The Visibility Equals Possibility collection has new designs and a new designer, me. My name is Zion, pronouns he, him, his, and I was on episode 53 if you want to go back and check that out. But I am the second trans man of color to design for the Visibility Equals Possibility collection. Dem Bois believes visibility equals possibility, and so do I. I am honored to take part in this groundbreaking collection and look forward to seeing what else the collection has in store. My designs represent having confidence and courage to be bold with your visibility. The design, in my mind, says, take the caution you need, but I am here. I hope you all enjoy the designs, and be sure to purchase some designs from me or Emilio to support the gender-affirming programs by Dem Bois. Find the amazing designs of the Visibility Equals Possibility collection and other merch items that I've designed on the Dem Bois shop at dembois.org. That's DEMBOI as in igloo s.org. And remember, visibility equals possibility.
Yeah, I want to kind of go back a little bit to talk about who Kai Green is. And so for folks who would love to know about Kai Green's story, his journey outside of the memoir, of course, we want you to check out the memoir as well. But he was also a guest on episode 102. And I've had moments when I've met Kai in the past. We kind of, well, he kind of didn't remember, but I kind of remembered and forgot. But we kind of met in a leadership retreat kind of setting many years ago, and also just to have him on the show was an honor, really. And he's a scholar and he's a writer and just intelligent in the ways that he speaks, and also it shows up in the writing. And so one of the things that I appreciate about you talking about home was it kind of made me reflect on when I was younger and I used to write, and I always used to put definitions in my writing because I wanted folks to understand the context and what I was saying. I'm talking about when younger, meaning like third, fourth grade, right? Because I always felt like people wouldn't understand what I'm trying to say. And so to kind of read like those different definitions of home kind of brought it home for me is, no pun intended, but well, it's an opening to like, what does home mean for you? It had me to reflect. Because I didn't have an identity of what I think home was. I never felt like I came from anything that was a nice upbringing. So I didn't know what that home was. And so to see like those different definitions of home is like, oh, well, to me, home is not that. Okay, home is not that. But I actually, within those definitions, found what I thought home was. Which ones resonated with me the most when we talk about home. I thought that was really a nice way to kind of like start the book, because it's like this is the this is the point of view where I'm coming from when I'm talking about home, right? And it obviously shifts voice and what home meant as the book goes on. But I thought that was a very brilliant way to kind of like set the tone for what we are to expect in the pages ahead.
Yes, I agree. And also even like speaking of, also just to jump into like how it felt to read the book, I think the way that it starts is so I kind of found it like poetic actually, meaning like it felt, they're starting to read the book felt like it was opening itself like as a poem, like when he's sort of defining home as a noun, as a 4-letter word. There's so much repetition in the way that he kind of like approaches this, and I think, yes, I agree with you, Shawn, like that is something that is really, at least for me, I really felt throughout reading at least the first part, because I think once we get to part 2 it sort of shifts in the way that he's like telling the story, but there's so much like, there's such a strong sense of self and there's such a strong voice that is maintained throughout the first section in the prose. Like it's so, I don't know, it almost feels like sometimes it felt like reading someone's diary or something. Like it felt like I was like really like getting his like really intimate thoughts, and especially when he's sort of thinking about um like the moments when he's like younger and he's writing from that point of view, you can sort of hear like it feels like youthful, like it feels
Mm,
very much like he's like embodying like the self that he is like talking about, and that felt really special to read because it, I don't know, I'm trying to, it felt like yeah, it almost, I think sometimes when I was reading, a lot of times when I was reading this book, it felt like I was like overhearing him in some way, or I was sort of
mm,
like over listening or like peeking into someone having this really like, um, I don't know, like revelatory experience of like reimagining themselves like in the past and like their moms. Like I felt like I was like in the living rooms, you know, like yeah, or like at the like in church or like in school with him, or sort of like the different experiences that he has, which I think was just like beautiful. Like it felt very like um how do I say, sincere. Yeah,
mm,
yeah, the writing, the prose itself, like it feels very sincere, and I think immediately like the effect that it had for me was that I felt like I was like safe like reading it. Like I think that there was a sense of like, okay, like I'm being held even as I'm like sort of reading through a lot of trauma too, right? Like a lot
mm.
of like really like tragic episodes, but at the same time it felt like, okay, like, you know, like, yeah, I don't know, like it's okay to sort of like be here and like listen to what happened.
Mm.
Um, yeah, what did it feel like for you to read the book?
Yeah, so I want to focus on the part that you're talking about, like the younger self. I think me and you
Mm,
talked about this previously. Of like, I just mentioned it when I talked about home. I didn't have a healthy home that I grew up in, so I never. I just thought, okay, I can't wait to be wait to be 18 so I can get up out of here. Right? I only saw 18. I didn't say past 18, so I didn't have a healthy home. And so reading this, I also felt like it was giving me the blueprint to my own girlhood that I missed out
mm,
on, or that I suppressed, or I forgot. And so it was like, wow, I was thinking about the things of like, he talked about his father and his relationship with his father. And I was like, oh shit, I kind of had a rocky relationship with my father as well too, right? And just like
mm,
thinking about the church and relationship with grandma and all these things, right? It was like, yo, I saw it in my own mind. It was like reliving my own youth. I was like, oh wow, like
mm,
some of these things really resonate in me because these are some of the things that I can remember from my own youth. I'm like, I felt like I was looking in a mirror almost in some at some points, even like the relationship with the father. Not to give away the book, but just like the in and out of his life. And I was like, oh, I
mhm,
experienced some of those same things, but as I got older, I just wanted to forget about it, right? Because it wasn't healthy. It wasn't home for me. So it's like I want to forget all the bad things. And so this was really it brought up some really core memories for me that I had suppressed
mhm,
for so long, and experiences that I had suppressed that I had forgot about. And it invited me into my own girlhood. And so I really appreciated some of that. And I did feel like I was also like you letting me into your life as a child, right? I don't know.
mhm.
It was really warm and soft read, right? And there were some traumatic things in there, but at the same time, I felt like it was like, whoa, I'm on this journey with a baby girl, and it felt
Yes,
really, really good.
yes, yes, I'm totally with you. Um, what's also resonating for me is like just thinking about, man, as I was reading, yeah, I was like thinking about the work that like he's had to do like for himself, like
Mm,
in order to even be able to like tell a story like this, meaning like to be able to like sit with experiences that he had in the past, um and just like recount like his story, you know, like I think for me, i I think there's like, and maybe the childhood piece also is something that like those sections really stuck out to me because of how sort of like clearly he remembers certain things or like the details that he offers. um like I was thinking like, would I be able to do that with
mm,
my own
mm,
childhood? And quite honestly, I struggle with that because I think that there's, I don't know, there's a lot of there's certain like moments, yeah, from my childhood that feel really distant and feel really like difficult to recover or recuperate, that I don't think that I would be able to like tell it to someone or like write it down. And I think so in that way, honestly, there's like some envy that I felt like while I was reading it, because I was like, oh wow, like why could I do that? Like, or maybe the other question is like, what, I don't know, because sometimes I think our brains like kind of protect ourselves by not remembering certain things. And so like, yeah, as I was reading it too, I was thinking about like what I don't remember from my childhood and why that is. And like, if it's, sort of like, I think writing is a tool that is really healing. Of course, I believe that as a poet and as a writer. And like, I was like thinking about like, one, sure, how difficult it might have been to sort of like be writing this, but also like how healing it would be to be able to like reach back to your younger self and sort of like be able to like talk to that person so directly, like as the person that you are today. Yeah, there's just so much that's happening. There's so much that's happening in this book, like the like how it's like linear to a certain extent, but it's also not linear because there's so much like back and forth between like present and past self, and like, people who were once in his life who aren't. Yeah, really beautiful. I thought it was really beautiful. And I guess we should also maybe talk about like the different parts, meaning the other sections that are less about like a recounting, right? Like there's a section that is sort of around letters, where Dr. Green is exploring letter writing as something that was helpful for him, to connect to himself, his past self, his father, folks who have been imprisoned. I thought that was kind of interesting too. But it definitely like, I think I'm noting it because it felt like there was a very intentional shift in the voice of the narrative. And I mean that even quite literally, because between part one and part two, and I am curious what you like made of those sections, Shawn. There's like, right, so like it ends on page 92, the first part, and then there's a break, and then there's break, and then there's hold, and then there's another break. Oh wait, no, before hold, we have a break. And actually on that page, I wrote exhaled here. Like as I was reading, like once I finished the first chapter, I was like, okay, yeah, this was something, right? And so the fact that like the next couple pages were quite literally like Dr. Green saying like, okay, yeah, let's take a break, was a way for me to like breathe and to exhale. And I literally wrote exhale here. And then the next page is release, right? And then it comes inhale, exhale, and breathe. And I just like absolutely loved it. I loved it because it felt so intentional for him to be like, yes. And I think even in the I don't know, maybe there's sort of like like a preemptive like author statement that says something like, these different parts are different, so like we kind of expect that. But I think that it felt so sincere again, to feel as if like this book was mindful of you as a reader reading it, so much so that like there were several pages that are dedicated to breath, like to inhaling and exhaling and taking a pause and taking a break, which also reminds me to point out that I appreciate that at the beginning of the book, Dr. Green instructs us to read this book out loud and also silently, right? Which are two different reading experiences. Do you read books out loud, Shawn? Do you read them like, do you ever read out loud?
I do. And I was I was going to segue into that because I wanted to read that actually. Me. Yeah, but I do actually read out loud. I was just taught in school that it's, especially when you write, you are able to edit it better if you read it out loud, right? Because it's the way that other folks will be reading it. So I read out loud a lot, and I also read out loud to my granddaughter. So I don't know if that counts, but I read out loud often, especially when it's something I'm like, wait, I want to get that. But in the beginning of the book, he did have a section for readers. It says, "Dear reader, read this text aloud and silently. for multiple narratives are available for the feeling and the knowing on various registers. In the same way, you can read the text from start to finish or simply begin where your finger point takes you. There are many journeys to be had here, Black trans man. I think that is so true. And there are parts when I wasn't, when I wasn't around other people, I do read out loud often. It helps me to land what I'm reading. It helps me to, reading it silently and reading it aloud gives you a different interpretation, I feel like. So I tend to do that.
Hey y'all, Pink Lady here. I am the producer for Dem Bois Podcast, and I am so excited to tell you about my production company, Pink Lady Productions. We collaborate with creatives like you who are driven to share your message by launching your podcast from A to Z and coaching you through the process. To learn more about our services, check out our website at pinkladyprod.com. That's PINKLADYPROD.com.
I wanted to ask you, well, not ask you, but I wanted to refer to the spaces that you were talking about. And I felt like those spaces in the book were necessary. There was some heavy pieces in the book, and I feel like that was that break, that space to breathe and to remember that to breathe was intentional in a way that it's like, okay, I know that I just gave you some heavy shit. And so now it's time to take a breath. And I actually, I tend to do that anyway. I read very intensely, and I won't talk about it much, but I have an ability to kind of, my awareness and my ability to place myself in spaces from what I'm reading is, I won't say next level, but it's definitely a gift. So I won't talk about it as much, but I tend to, when it's something that's very, very heavy on my mind, I tend to get sleepy. It's my nervous system processing what I'm reading and saying, this is heavy, this is a lot. And so sometimes in the book, I had to actually put it down. There's a couple pieces, and I want to reflect on one of those things in a bit, but I have to take a break because I need my mind time. I need to give my mind time to process what I read and where I am in the storytelling, and also to take myself out of that space. So it's a nervous system response, and it's also just the way I process information and how I connect with reading. And so those empty spaces with my moment, it was kind of like a snap back into reality of like, wait a minute, Shawn, you're not actually there, you're here. So actually look at these blank spaces, take that moment to breathe and recenter yourself and come back. And so I actually did the space, and then I closed the book and I came back the next day to read it. And I went back to the spaces to remind myself to breathe, because we're entering a new part of the book. And so I really like that intentional. And right before we started recording, Joel, you actually did a breath work for us. And so it's kind of like the same thing, right? Of being grounded, making sure you are aware of where your feet are planted, your posture, your breathing, all of that stuff. So I really appreciated that piece in the book.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I'm down to go to one of those places that you're thinking of that sort of like stuck out for you. Before we do that, I just kind of sitting back with these sort of like in between moments, these pages of like break. I'm sitting now also with the break-in, because I don't know, like first, like, because one, I mean, part of this book, which is something that we pointed out to each other really early on, is that Dr. Green uses this language of be and come, right? It's sort of like a wordplay thing, very much like a poetic way of thinking about becoming and transformation and being and going towards yourself, coming towards yourself, going towards home. I don't know. There's just like a really sort of like beautiful diction that he has throughout the book when he's thinking about like this idea of becoming, and the use of the ampersand as like a break in between the be and the come. But yeah, I also find it to be really sort of like intentional that there's a break that comes first and then a break in, right? So it's almost sort of like directing us towards that, the fact that like it's okay if the things that you read in this book also break you in some sort of way. It's okay
Mm,
if there is some sort of like, I don't know, like if there are moments of heartbreaks that happen when you're reading this book because it's making you think about a certain aspect of yourself or a way that you can relate to some of the struggles that he's been through. Like the fact that that's also part of this hold is like, I think a really intentional thing because after the break in, right, you break and then the break in, there comes a hold. So it's
mm-hmm,
almost also like, to me, I read that as like a sense of like safety, that it's like even in sort of like the ways that our experiences can really leave, sort of like scars or really, I don't know, just sort of touch us in ways that can be hurtful, that there are also spaces or people that are able to still hold us within those sort of like, um, yeah, really like transformative like episodes. And I don't know. I just like I think that there's just I don't know if I've necessarily like read a book in this way where the instructions are like the instructions that are articulated in between the sections are like towards like our own sense of self. Like that's for
mm-hmm,
us to be able to be like, okay, yes, like I'm gonna take a break here. It's sort of like, those like, I don't know, I think in school when I would take like just like tests or whatever, there's always a page that says like this page was left intentionally blank or something.
yeah,
Like it's sort of like this, but it's like this page wasn't left blank. It was intentionally like held as like a holding space, right? And I'm
mm-hmm,
with you too. Like I read this book and then I had to put it down for a minute, to just also even be able to be like, okay, like I'm gonna sit with what I've read. I'm gonna let it like wash over me and like feel the feelings that like came up as I was reading it. And I think Dr. Green is really intentional about like acknowledging that that is like a possibility that would happen like in this read, and also like making a space to like still feel like a sense of like safety. Like he's with you the entire time, right? Like he never leaves you, like even as you're
mm-hmm.
like taking a break from what he's written. And yeah, I really dig it. Yeah.
And what was something that idea or like something that really stuck out to you in the book where you like, whoa, like that's me, that resonated with me? If you could take
Mhm.
anything out of the book, just that one piece where you like, whoa, that shifted my mind frame, whatever. Do you have any piece like that was in the book?
Yes, I do. For me, uh, and I guess like sort of part of why I was a little bit intrigued about this book, especially after having listened to Dr. Green's podcast and interview with you, um, was I was interested in um, how like he would kind of talk about some of his like mental health, like challenges or just sort of like experiences that he's had. Because I remember at the end of that episode, I remember thinking like, whoa, like him and I are really like similar in a lot of ways. Meaning like I can relate to him as an academic, right? As a Black person, a Black trans queer person, who is very much interrogating masculinity, what it means to be a Black man. Um, yeah, and also sort of the added layer of someone who has um, experiences with manic episodes. And when I sort of like listened to that podcast, I was like, wow, I guess I've never really at that time I hadn't really like talked to anyone who sort of had all of those sort of like same traits. And I think there was a part of me that knew that it would come like in this book, especially because in the episode he sort of talks about like his experience with mania sort of like happened while he was teaching. And as someone who's, sort of like in an academic space, yeah, I think that was something that was like really on my mind. And so those moments, I think for me, were the ones that felt the most difficult to read. I think in the same way that you're talking about, Shawn, like, you're sort of like reading about someone's own experiences of themselves, but sort of being able to like see yourself reflected in some sort of way. It kind of makes you feel, at least for me, it made me feel like I'm wanting to like put some sort of like distance between us because I'm like, okay, well, this isn't me. but also at the same time, it's like, okay, well, there's some of the ways that you're like describing yourself, or sort of like what's leading up to this episode, what's happening beforehand, right? Like, is also reminding me of myself. And I think that was a tricky thing to hold and read at the same time. I can point us to a particular section that I think sort of like kind of encapsulated it for me, where at this point I think I felt more like affirmed, in the sense that I think one of the beautiful like aspects of language, and I think part of why I appreciate this book a lot, is that when, and I think that's also the other thing about like this show and this podcast and all the guests that we have, is that there's a thread line of identity, but also there's so many ways, like there's so many like distinct ways that we experience who we are in the world. And at the same time, like having someone who experienced their version of their world be able to sort of like put something, like use language to like encapsulate an event or a particular like moment in their life that you can sort of like relate to. There's like, I don't know, like a different sort of like affirmation that like happens in that, no matter how sort of even like difficult or challenging it is for you to accept. And here I'm especially thinking about the section where he's like grappling with um sort of like, yeah, being at a university, and sort of like uh I guess maybe like the section that like leads to him talking about his manic episode. And this is something that he like kind of briefly mentioned on the podcast, but here he writes, I lost everything and I knew I'd have to find myself again, recreate myself again, a transition that would take a whole new lifetime. I had to accept that bipolar was not just a made up thing, that I had been manic and now I was depressed beyond what my body could hold. And I share that because I think it sort of like softened something inside of me, to have someone also sort of recognize like, oh, I have been undergoing like these different types of transitions, and here again sort of comes like a part of me that I must yet again like grapple with, and sort of like think about what it means for me. And I really relate to that, because when I had gone through a manic episode a couple years back, I remember that was something. It was a diagnosis for me. Like bipolar disorder was a really difficult diagnosis for me to grapple with, because I just kept thinking like there are so many other things that sort of like make it challenging for me to be in the world, and to sort of understand the ways that something else might like challenge my like sense of self, was a really difficult thing. And at the same time, it sort of also happened while I was like grappling with my own transition. And yeah, I don't know, I just really appreciated like the honesty that he like talks about, with like what it meant to sort of, like having to like re-recognize himself, or like re-recognize his body, and like, yeah, I don't know, I'm having a hard time even just sort of like putting it into words. But I think like thinking about all of that, like also, as someone who is like having gone through like a lifetime of like questioning yourself, and then sort of like also, receiving like a diagnosis, or like an understanding of yourself that you then just also kind of have to grapple with, is something that I really, I don't know, I felt held. I guess I felt held. It was just nice to sort of like read someone else's like story, and how he, kind of moved through it, because I think there's a lot of like, I related a lot also to, having to relearn how to move, like relearn like where to put energy towards, like relearning how to like ask for help from people, right? Like understanding that like, yeah, just sort of like self alienation, isn't isn't super helpful, but like how to move like in community, especially when you're like having a hard time like internally. Yeah, I don't know, it was a yeah, it was something that like I'm appreciative of the ways that he talks about it, especially like as a Black trans man, because I also think that I have read or like listened to like podcasts, for example, about Black women and how they are or are not diagnosed with bipolar disorder and the sort of like disparities that occur there. And so I think like having someone who's like thinking about it and talking about it from a Black trans masculine perspective was something that felt really like honoring like to my experience as well.
Mm.
This is something that I also don't, I feel like I don't talk about a lot, or even write about a lot, right? Like sort of like my own like experience with mental health in this way. And I think like reading this like kind of gives me that courage and like um I don't know, like emboldens me to sort of like not even accept, but like acknowledge this as an experience that other people can also have. And I think like Dr. Green, like just being, yeah, so open about his own experiences, it's like it like enables me to even be here and like share this or like talk about this like with you. Yeah, and with I guess people who are listening to this as well.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. It's that chapter actually brought up some things for me. And so the title of that chapter is actually Break, which kind of makes sense. And so, but the reason why I was drawn to it is totally different from your reason, because it's more so secondary than actually myself. And so I want to kind of like give a little backstory to it. And so I pray, right, that if my son ever listens to this episode, that he forgives me for mentioning this. But I also know my son, and I hope that, I would have his blessing to mention this. But when he talked about his mental health and his break and hospitalization, like I said before, I kind of put myself there. But it was very eye-opening to me because some years ago, my son had a manic episode and he was hospitalized a few times. I've never mentioned this on the show. So that's why I asked for forgiveness ahead of time. So if you ever listen to this, but the way Kai described his experiences within the mental health institution, how he felt, how he was treated, how his treatment made him feel, it actually made me cry when I read it, because it was like almost like an aha moment, because I started to remember what my son was telling me at the time that he was hospitalized. And some of those things that Kai discussed and talked about, I was like, that's what he was talking about. These are the feelings that he was trying to express. And it was a lot of him crying and expressing his inner self, and they're not listening to me and they treated me like I'm crazy. But at the same time, it's like, I won't discuss his diagnosis, but at the same time, it's like, no, son, but these are some things, you have to learn how to rework and how to find a new normal. And he was in his early 20s. And of course, when you're in your early 20s, you got other things in your life that you want to do and you're thinking about. You're not, your mental health, that's like, just like is derailing you from what the things that you wanted to do. But it allowed me to see, as I was reading the book, I felt like I was sitting right there in the room with Kai, right there in the room with my son. And I was like, whoa, this was their experience. I get it now. And so I had a moment of just sadness, and not because I didn't understand at the time, but I didn't have an insight to it. And I felt like Kai gave us that insight to the experience and how he was feeling going through those things. And so I know I took a quote from what he said within that chapter. It was like page 123. He said, and it kind of, after I went through my emotions and my emotions around it, and I want to go back and talk to my son too about it. He doesn't like to talk about it, but I do want to mention to him that I understand, and I can say that I'm sorry that happened to you. You have no control over it, but I'm sorry that happened to you. And I'm sorry that I didn't have that understanding at that time, even though it was many years ago. But on page 123, he said, we do have the capacity to heal in the break too. And that just really stuck out to me. And so thank you for sharing that too, Joel, about just how it made you feel, and, And I want to say I
Yes.
appreciate Kai for just giving us a look into that, right? Because that part could have been
Yes.
brushed over. That could have been like, yeah, I had an episode, but then, here I am, right? And so I
Yes.
really appreciate him for being vulnerable and for sharing those pieces of his life that he didn't have to share with
Yes.
us. So
Yes. Yeah, like amen to all this. I want to share also that this is making me recall that during my say in the psych ward, that's when I remember actually going through my like pronoun switch. I don't know if at the time I was still using they them pronouns, but I remember like very vividly they had a board with all of our names on and sort of like what we're supposed to be doing at each given time. And they also had our pronouns, right? And I remember the moment where I was like, okay, yeah, I'm in my he him bag right now. Like this is what I'm stepping into. And I asked the the nurse that was sort of in charge of all of these things to like change my name on the board. And I remember I would sort of like walk past the nurse station and I would see my name and I would see my pronoun switch and be like, yes, like this is me. Like I'm stepping into myself. So I really appreciate you reading that quote to us, Shawn, of, like it was, before that he writes a break in always that bad. And I remember when I was sort of going through this episode, I remember thinking like, oh man, like this is like the toughest thing. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like this is such a hard thing to be going through. And also at the same time, there were moments, and this maybe came afterwards, where I was able to reflect like, hey, this was also a moment where I was able to see parts of myself more clearly, right? So yeah, there's so many good and juicy parts of this. And I appreciate, I feel like the word that I've been trying to find is vulnerable. This book is just insanely vulnerable in a way that like that kind of breaks you, right? It sort of like forces you to be vulnerable with yourself as well. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to break. Some of us have to break to get to the good stuff. And so it's just like a puzzle. The puzzle, you see the puzzle in one piece, but you got to take it apart, right, to get to the big picture. And sometimes that happens to some of us. And it's about the capacity to heal and to break. I just love that quote, right? And we think of it as like, it's not always just a mental health crisis. Sometimes, it could be within our transitions, or, losing our blood family, or, right? It's like, that's still breaking, but we had the capacity to heal in that break. So 2026 marks 10 years of Dem Bois Inc. That's 10 years of community care, 10 years of leadership rooted in love, and 10 years of turning visibility into possibility. And so to honor this milestone, we've launched our 10 for 10 campaign. You're like, Shawn, 10 for 10, what's that? So we are inviting you, our listeners, our supporters, our allies, and other folks in the community to give $10 a month to help sustain the care, leadership, and visibility that trans men of color deserve. And so 10 years is a very long time, right? That's a decade. Can you imagine raising a child for birth and then looking at them at their 10th birthday party and being like, wow, you've watched so much of their growth within that 10 years, right? That's the same for us. And so Dem Bois Inc., over the 10 years, we have done a lot. And so we have provided gender affirming surgery grants to trans men of color to obtain gender affirming surgeries. We started this podcast. We are now in season 4 of the podcast in 2026. We created our Visibility Equals Possibility merch. We partnered with Emilio and Zion, both trans men of color, to design what visibility equals possibility means to them. And it's reflected in our merch. We also partnered with the Black trans man, Mola Flow, to create our theme song. And that's the music that you hear every time you tune into Dem Bois Podcast. We've done merch. We've done partnering. We have delivered care packages to trans men of color in need of personal hygiene items within our community. We have done a lot in 10 years. And so imagine what the next 10 years would look like. Donating $10 a month says, I believe in this work. I believe in the future of trans men of color, and I believe in what comes next. And so if this call resonates with you, join us today. And we've even made it easy. You don't even got to go anywhere. Whatever platform you're listening to this episode, go ahead and open up the show notes. And from there, you will be able to click the link to start your contribution to our 10 for 10 campaign. Your monthly support helps ensure Dem Boys can continue showing up for our community with intention, care, and impact. So thank you for listening, and thank you for believing in our mission. Okay, and I'm going to get out of here so you can listen to this episode. Take care. Was there any pieces in the book that you feel like you missed out on, or like could have been included, or anything like that? Any ideas or places that the book didn't quite touch on that you said, "Oh, I'm missing this piece"?
You go first.
Oh, damn! You just put me on the spot. How you know I had something to say?
No, because I'm thinking. Okay. Wait.
I can go first.
I
you
think.
Want me to.
Okay, you go first then. Yeah.
You sure?
No, I'll go.
Okay.
The only thing was that I was like, how much did he actually like write about this? I was honestly, and this is probably just because of my own sort of like, probably because of my own experience, right? As someone who is currently in grad school, and kind of, thinking about what it means to be in academia, to be a professor. So I was really intrigued at him. I think perhaps what I was looking forward to was more detail or information. Not information sounds weird. Anecdotes. I'm not really quite sure. Something having to do with, I guess, like his experience as a professor. And I say that maybe just more so selfishly, as someone who, right, like I started teaching. When I started teaching, I was was that a year? It was maybe a year on T. And every year since then has sort of been different in the ways that I've like been able to introduce myself to my students, right? Actually, wait, no. Yeah, when I first started teaching, it was before I had top surgery. And I think since then, the way that I've sort of just been able to present myself, or how I have presented myself to my students, has changed. And I know of some Black and trans mask folks in academia. Not some. I mean, there are, of course, are, including Dr. Green and others. But I think for me, like as a young person, as someone who's in the realm of teaching, and especially sort of thinking about like also where you're teaching, right? Not always, but I find myself in predominantly white institutions, and so it's like my identity as a Black trans person is sort of like an institutionally or structurally debated, and I'm curious about what unlike a more like grand scheme, like what it might be like to be teaching, to be teaching as a Black and trans like professional. Yeah, that's something that I'm curious about. And why? Just because it's like a different politic, I think. It's a different politic, and it begs other questions, and just sort of like, I don't know. Yeah, it's a different like identity point. And I'm just intrigued. I think that's something that and he mentions it. I won't even say that he doesn't mention it. He does mention it, of course, but that's something that I'm more curious about. Yeah.
I think mine is kind of similar. I wish that he would have, kind of not necessarily the higher ed piece. And I think because we both, you and I both have different experiences with higher education. And some good, some bad from my perspective. Mostly mine bad. And for folks who know my stories, mostly because I was homeless at the time when I went to college. And so survival was the most important thing to me, not necessarily education. And so I kind of shifted as the years went on. But I wish that he would have made a connection, because he talked about growing up near my area, We grew up similar in the same times, right? 80s, 90s. He grew up in Oakland, California. And from folks that are from Oakland, California, know about Oakland, California, a lot of times folks don't make it out. And so I was kind of really interested to know how he made the switch to boarding school, from being in Oakland to boarding school, and obviously that opportunity opened up all the opportunities for higher education, right? But I would have loved to hear the connection between those two, of how you go from basic public education, subpar public education in the Oakland school system, to going to boarding school. I would have loved to hear that, just that little piece of how that happened. So not a big deal, right? That could come later.
That's right. Yeah, there's always more. I mean, I think that's also probably like a telling of a good story recounted, right, is that you want more, right? Yeah. Maybe we can talk about maybe like a lasting image that like stayed with each of us.
Yeah, you go first.
Close it out.
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. Yes. Yes, I have one, and I have to also pull up another poem first. And this is Phenomenal Woman by Maya Angelou. And the reason why is because that was one of the first poems that I learned to recite when I was in like maybe 9th grade. Yeah. And I bring this up because this is the image that I want to leave folks with. Yeah, I love this because I feel like so much of this book is also an invitation for other Black trans mass folks to be in their bodies. And yeah, just sort of like cherish their bodies as they are. And for me, when I think about sort of like being Black and like loving one's body, I think about this poem. I remember reciting it to like my like class in 9th grade, where I was like I think, yeah, where I was probably very likely the only Black student. And I read this poem out loud, and you might recognize it, y'all. So it goes like this. This is Phenomenal Woman by Maya Angelou. This is just the first stanza that I'll read, and then I'll read a little bit from Dr. Green's book. So, pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman, that's me. Yeah, and there's a really great section here. This is, I think, one of the end. This is actually the end of part 2. And Dr. Green is, sort of thinking about, just, what does it mean to be man? And I think some of us, like as we transition, or sort of sometimes maybe interrogating, right, like our masculinities in different ways. And I love this as an invitation towards being tender towards ourselves, and in our bodies, right? So he writes, what kind of men do I want to be? What kind of men do I want to see in the future? Men who love themselves and their bodies, hips wide or thin as a rail and everything in between. Hips may hold for me a tenderness that the world isn't ready to love, but I must love in the meantime because I and they are here. Perhaps not to say, but for now and in this moment, I long to give this body of mine a tenderness not often offered to men with body. Yeah, and I just like, I absolutely think it's stunning. I think sort of even thinking about like the experience of, sort of coming from, Blackness and a female experience and the transition of one's body, right? And like, even sort of thinking about like tenderness towards like masculinity, right? Like how often do like men speak softly to themselves when it comes to their bodies? And like Dr. Green here offers us this like invitation towards like holding ourselves with like a lot of tenderness, right? Like our hips, our bodies, like our body's in transition, in flux always, and sort of like, you know, saying like, welcome, like this body here is welcomed, like I welcome my body. And I just think that it's really beautiful.
Yeah. I think this
Phenomenal bodies.
yes, I think this book it's just phenomenal. I can't, it's hard to put it into words because you got to read it. But I feel like, you know, when I say visibility equals possibility, it applies, like, right? We have the ability to be visible and show other folks our possibility through our stories, through our poems, and this is just another version of that, right? Someone sharing their story, being visible, being vulnerable, sharing their story about their life and pieces that they didn't even have to share with us, right? And it just gives an insight into the complexities of our life, just different versions of trans experience, right? Because somebody may not talk about themselves as a Black girl, but this is just another version of how we can discuss our lives and how vast our experiences are. I just really had a good time reading this book, and it's not even a long read, right? It's only 200 pages. But I feel like it was just packed with just so much, just stuff, information, visuals, wordplay, lexical choices. It's just brilliant. And I want to say to Kai Green, just thank you for sharing this portion of yourself with the world. This is beautiful, even just from the artwork. And he goes into the back of discussing the artwork and where it came from. And I want to read something really, really quickly from the beginning. So you know how you get a book and folks that have read it previously, they have their thoughts about it. And so this person, I don't want to mess up the pronunciation of their first name, but I'll just start with their first initial. Kay Lehman, author of Heavy, an American memoir, said Kai Green has been one of the most dynamic writers alive for a while. This memoir cements them as something wholly different. I have stretched and laughed and wept over this book. There is no memoir alive as fleshy and radically theoretical as this offering. Green takes Barbara Christian's thought to a place that I've never imagined. This place where the body is as worn and flexible as the theory we use to explore it is so Black, and this Black is so necessarily trans. We wouldn't know or feel any of this if the prose weren't so in the pocket. Kai has made a book feel like flesh. So true. And so you can take our word for it. Joël, I appreciate you for joining me and sharing your thoughts with me about this book. For folks that want to pick up their own copy, you can purchase it on Feminist Press. I'll make sure to add a link in the description so folks can pick up their copy. Don't sleep on this. Do not sleep on this. This is a good read. Definitely deserves to be on your bookshelf. So Joël, any last words before we get up out of here?
Yeah, read the book. Yeah, read the book. Support Dr. Green. Talk to us if you have thoughts, reflections, feelings. Write to us. Write to me. Write to Shawn. It's an honor to be in community with this book and with Dr. Green and with you, Shawn.
Yes, thank you so much.